Yeah, what'd you pour here?
This is some of our a big barrel of Knob Creek that we bought.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is the one you were doing at the Whiskey Live, yeah.
I think I've got some Four Roses coming next week.
Hey everyone, wanted to give you an update on those that have pledged $10 or more on Patreon back in May. Your bourbon samples have finally left my house and will be arriving to yours very soon. There was a lot of interest in Willett Family Estate, Blanton Straight from the Barrel, and an Eagle Rare 11.5-year store pick from Liquor Barn. I've also mailed out the Pappy 15-year samples to those as well. In a few months, we will be making t-shirts to send to everyone, so stay tuned for that. Just as a reminder, we'll be also having a giveaway every month, so make sure you go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/yourbourbonpursuit, and support the show. Without your support, we can't keep this going, so thank you all so much. And we're back with another episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Kenny and Ryan, and we are doing yet another first for us. We're actually on a stop of the Urban Bourbon Trail, right?
Yeah, we're here at Bourbon's Bistro. You know, it's Jason. I think he had the foresight a long time ago to know this bourbon bin was coming because he was one of the first ones to kind of, do a bar themed around bourbon and a restaurant themed around bourbon. We frequent here quite often. The goat cheese is killer.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally like in my backyard. I live about 5 to 8 minutes away from here. I'm just a few streets over. So
yeah, same here. It's a cheap Uber ride for us, but no, I'm excited to be here. Jason's been kind enough to give us some, awesome bourbon, so we're ready to do the show.
His own Booker's pick we got here, but we have to say again, thanks to Adam Johnson of the Kentucky Bourbon Affair for giving us tickets to Whiskey Live media passes, so we can actually go and meet all these great folks that we can now get on our podcast. So we have to say thank you. Anybody that's not familiar with the Urban Bourbon Trail, if you don't know about it, it's actually sponsored by the Louisville's Visitor Center, the Convention Bureau, and it's sort of a way to kind of show attractions relating to bourbon right here in the heart of the city. The majority of it is kind of restaurants and bars, but you can always download the app. It's called Urban Bourbon Trail, and you can kind of look at it yourself. You can go to one of the many establishments or go to Louisville's Visitor Center and pick up your own passport. And in that passport, you kind of see there's an array of, 20, 30, 40 different places that you can go and you can get stamped and, end up with a free t-shirt at the end or something like that. So there actually is more to the Bourbon Trail itself than just the Bourbon Trail. So if you are staying in Louisville, make sure you also check out the Urban Bourbon Trail. Maybe we could do an episode about that one of these days.
For sure.
Okay. But let's go ahead and introduce our guest. So today we have Jason Brauner. Jason is the owner of the Louisville-based restaurant Bourbon's Bistro. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So before we begin and dive in and talk about the restaurant and all those other great things, kind of talk about the history of you, right? Kind of how everything has come from your childhood up until this point right now, and how bourbon has had some sort of effect on it.
Well, I guess it all started. I grew up over in Crescent Hill, the Clifton area to be more precise, on Payne Street, which back in the 70s, kind of telling my age when I grew up, running the streets over there, there was National Distillery, which was at Lexington and Payne Street. And if you're familiar with National Distillery, they made a lot of great brands back in the day. They actually closed their plant there in '77. So I had some family members work there, and for our neighborhood, I guess National Distillery was kind of the UPS of the time, big economic hub. Everybody had jobs there. So as a kid, I would see all these people walking to work, and finally came to realize what it was all about, what they were making there and storing there. There was a big barrel warehouse there as well that's been torn down since then. But some of the buildings are still there from the actual distillery. And it's just been a kind of part of my neighborhood fabric of growing up. And like I said, a few of my relatives actually work there. So I kind of get bourbon, honestly. It seems like all my great aunts and uncles, that's all they drank was bourbon. I think the first drink I ever learned how to make was a highball. And I was like, what's that? They'd be sitting around playing cards, and they say, go put me some Old Crow in a glass about that high, 3 or 4 fingers, and then put a little ginger ale on top of it. So, I was a bartender at the ripe old age of like 6 or 7.
That's awesome. Did you have the foresight to just like stock away a bunch of old granddad and Bill Taylor and stuff?
Yeah, I wish I would have at that point, and I wish my relatives would have as well. But I do, that's my hobby now. I collect older whiskey. Big fan of old bourbon.
Oh yeah, we'll want to talk about that
for sure.
Yeah,
I'm a big Dusty guy, so I'm excited to talk to you about that.
Definitely.
But talk about, because I remember the first time that we met at Whiskey Live, you were wearing your great uncle's watch. Kind of talk about that and what that significance really was.
Yeah, it was I never did actually know my great uncle. He had passed away before I was born, I think. But my great aunt, I spent a lot of time with her. She lived next door to my parents, so I'd spend a lot of time over there. We would go over there and eat pound cake and whatever, and help her with her lawn and whatever. But she started working at National Distillery when she was 14. She had lied about her age.
I was like, that's
no child worker laws then.
No, she had lied about her age, and because that was the only jobs around. And she worked her way up and actually retired from there, and her husband retired from there as well. Or actually, he died there. He died
here we
at
go.
the plant.
I was about to say, here's a story.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that in a second. But, she lived to be 95, and when she passed away, she had in her will that I would get his watch, because she knew I was a big whiskey fan, bourbon fan. And they actually gave him a watch for 25 years of service at National Distillery, which was it's a Tiffany watch, a Tiffany gold watch from 1957, and it says from National Distillery to my great uncle for 25 years of service. So that's a really cool piece for me, being able to get that, and I wear it out sometimes. But it's a real neat piece just because I'm into bourbon and all of that.
Absolutely. So we're here at the restaurant, so everybody can't hear or can't see it, right? We're looking at it, but get everybody the scoop. Like what's the digs about it? Like what's the kind of vibe you're going for, and all these other kind of things.
Well, I think when we first started, we've been incorporated. I actually started out as Bourbon's Steakhouse. Got incorporated, I think, in about 2000 or 2001 as Bourbon Steakhouse. I didn't want to be cornered into a steakhouse because you're either a great one or you're not. Mm-hmm. I thought there was more room or more room to grow as far as culinary and having a bistro. I did some research on what a bistro really should be, and there's a huge tie between bourbon and the French. So
we'll kind of talk about that. I guess I don't really know much about the ties between the bourbon and the French, because that kind of is a little bit lost on me in the international realm there.
Yeah, well, Louisville's named after Louis XVI of France, who basically the French funded our Revolutionary War from Great Britain, and the French are involved deeply if you think of Paris, Kentucky, and Versailles. So there's a lot
because we don't say Versailles.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. But there's a lot of homage or whatever that we give to the French for them giving us money so we could get away from the Britons. So it also ties in with, the Louisiana Purchase. There's a lot of French influence in New Orleans. Okay, with Bourbon Street, there was a Bourbon family, and we, still to this day, nobody can really track down where Bourbon came from, where the actual name came from. We can kind of narrow it down, but you're talking about Bourbon County, Virginia, then it became Kentucky, up I guess near Maysville or what have you. But basically, the French had a big role to play, even in trade when the basis of trade back in the day was the river. We would make moonshine up here, put it in barrels, and then we float it down to the river. And there was a big market for it in New Orleans. So, and by the time it got down there, for some reason, somebody had charred a barrel, and they talked about used barrels and Elijah Craig, this, that, and the other thing.
The tall tales.
Nobody really knows where that started either. But anyhow, by the time it got down there on the river, it had a nice brown hue to it, and they would stamp Bourbon County, and it was going to the Bourbon family and Bourbon Street, so you don't really know whether the chicken or the egg.
Right.
You know what I mean? But there's big ties with I think with bourbon whiskey and the French. So in starting the restaurant, I wanted to pay homage to that. So what I did is I called it a bistro. And it's kind of Southern, what I call is upscale Southern with a little bit of French influence. Not so Southern as you know, if you go down to New Orleans, there's a lot of culinary, there's like island influences down there. We don't get into much of the island stuff, but we're just kind of Southern America type food. So that's kind of, I thought it was a great palette or a good range of cooking that I would like to do, or my chef would, I would like a chef of mine to do.
So how did you think of you wanted to get in the restaurant business in the first place? Because did you come from that sort of background, or was it just like, you know what, like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get ahead of the curve?
I like bourbon.
Yeah.
A little bit of both. I started a little pizza place down in the Clifton area. I started Clifton's Pizza back in 1990 with a buddy of mine. We were in a band together. And we loved live music, and so we were going to start a pizza place with live music. And so we had a lot more time than we had money, and so Clifton's was born. So I was there for about 11 years and decided, I wanted to get into more full-service restaurant. I always drank bourbon, and a good buddy of mine named Joe Gdansky said, we're sitting around smoking cigars and drinking whiskey, and he's like, man, let's, we were going to start a restaurant together, and he said, man, let's call it Bourbons. And so we did, and got incorporated as Bourbons, and Joe and I never really got together on the partnership of the restaurant, so I picked up another partner, and here we are.
Yeah, it's awesome. And anybody doesn't know that Clifton's is still alive and kicking. It's just down the street from here, right? So you can still go and you can still get your pizza and listen to your live music, drink your Fall City, all that other kind of good stuff.
The last time I was there was a jug band playing.
Yeah.
It was pretty awesome. So talk about, this place is one of the first bars that I know that was like dedicated to bourbon in the area, and now they're obviously popping up everywhere. But
Yeah.
I guess, we've obviously hit a boom now, but, 10, 11 years ago it was kind of starting to hit, but not quite. So how did you, I guess, come up with that idea of we're going to, be a high-end bourbon bar as well?
Because it was a risky decision, right? I mean,
I was going to do a restaurant anyway, and it was just what theme should we put in the background? And as we're drinking bourbon, you got to thinking, and through my research, if you look at Kentucky in the time, back in I guess it was back in the 2000s, is when I really had the idea, is that, tobacco is taking a hit, the horse racing industry is somewhat taking a hit, and so Kentucky, 95% of the world's bourbon comes from 50 miles from here. And I thought, to me, it was undermarketed. And I thought, what a great backdrop for a restaurant. Kind of not really high class, but an upscale restaurant. One of our first T-shirts said we're going to bring bourbon back one sip at a time. So we were just out to educate the world about bourbon, because it's not, I always feel when I traveled around the country, people, oh, you're from Kentucky, and you actually have shoes on, and
you eat KFC.
And you don't have,
stereotypes.
Where are your bib overalls, and especially when I went to wine country, it really kind of pissed me off, because they just thought they're
too highbrow.
Yeah, so highbrow, so uppity, and bourbon is I think a more sophisticated drink than Scotch or wine could ever be. There's so many different flavors in there, and maybe it was out to prove the world that we're just not barefoot and pregnant down by the creek, making moonshine.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's It's an unbelievable drink. It's an unbelievable product.
So with that, I mean, you are kind of a whiskey bar, but you also are a full service restaurant. We'll get to the restaurant part in a second, but back in 2014, your restaurant was named one of the world's best whiskey bars. So talk about, A, what that means, and then B, kind of like how many bourbons do you really have on the menu here?
Well, the bourbon list ebbs and flows, and that's, if anybody knows bourbon, that the antique collections and all those, a lot of the stuff you don't get comes out in the fall, and it's supposed to last us all year. Well, if it's not gone by the holidays and New Year's, it's definitely gone by Derby.
Derby, yeah.
So our whiskey list definitely ebbs and flows quite a bit. And from the beginning, it wasn't really about how many do we have. What it was about for me is, this is Bourbon's Bistro. We're in the heart of bourbon country, and if we choose not to carry J.W. Dant, and this was back in the day when nobody knew what J.W. Dant was, if we choose not to use that, and somebody comes in and says, well, my uncle he was a Dant or something. Do you have Dant? No, we don't have it. Well, how are we Bourbon's Bistro if we don't have that? So what we did is we wanted to get every whiskey we could get our hands on, every bourbon. And we had a couple of scotches and a couple of ryes and whatever. But we really focused on bourbon. We didn't do it to start a pissing contest with how many do you have. We wanted to do it because we wanted to have what the people wanted. Mm-hmm. We wanted to have every brand that the people want. Hey, old, cabin still, whatever. We just wanted to make sure that we had it on the shelves when people came in and asked, because we're Bourbon's Bistro. It says it in the name.
Right. So there's a little bit of a stigma or an anticipation when you walk in these doors, right?
Yeah, I think so. And so, we've always been, well, how many do you have? Well, how many do you have? That's really not what it's about. It's the ones that we have. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So also at any one time, and we're sipping on a Knob Creek barrel right now, that you have a variable pick of a few different barrels. So kind of talk about some of the barrel picks you've had and maybe some of your favorite ones you've had over the years too.
Yeah, we do single barrels with different distilleries all the time. I think one of the first ones we did here was Woodford barrel, which was excellent. We actually got to non-chill filter it.
Which you don't get you gotta ask those, you gotta have the secret handshake to get a lot of those things, right?
And we would do taste tests in the bar. I called it their Woodford and our Woodford, and ours would win hands down all the time. So that was a fun barrel to do. We do a lot of Four Roses barrels. They're great to us. We're doing some Knob Creek. We're going to do the new Makers Experimental Woods. We're going to do that one. We've done some at Buffalo Trace. We'd like to do some more next year. Try to get back on their list.
It's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, it was definitely much easier several years ago than it is now.
Right.
To buy the single barrels.
Oh, I could imagine. So since you are a stop on the Urban Bourbon Trail, kind of talk about maybe what that means to that, right? I mean, is it kind of a badge of honor? Is it help business? I mean, kind of talk about what the Urban Bourbon Trail kind of means to it.
Yeah, I think the Urban Bourbon Trail is a great thing. At some point, I think it might be getting a little watered down.
With 30 different places
with
on
30
it?
different places, and we were one of the original ones on there, which, obviously what we've set out to do and what the industry's responding, so it's working. The tourism is up, and that's great. I just want to make sure, when we started, that we would give the diner or the bar patron a great experience and a great bourbon experience. Like I said, we were out to educate the world about bourbon, so we wanted to make sure that our staff was up to the task of teaching people what they wanted to learn, not just selling them, hey, yeah, we've got some Pappy for $200. It's not like that. I mean, we'll try to sell you, we'll try to talk you out of it before we'll try to talk you into it. We just want people to learn about bourbon. And I think with the 30 stops, I hope everybody's doing their due diligence. I just worry about somebody coming and wanting to have a good experience and not getting it at maybe one of these stops that are just doing it because of the
Just 'cause
popularity of it. You
it
know?
What
is
are some of the qualifications, I guess, to be on the Urban Bourbon Trail? Or is there?
There are, and I'm not really sure what they are.
Gotcha.
He just fixed all the check boxes, right?
Yeah, because I mean we meet most of them, I think.
Yeah.
And I always say, if martinis were popular, there'd be a bunch of martini bars, but we'd still be doing bourbon.
Right.
So I think a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon, and that's fine. I just hope that they, take it as maybe they don't take it as seriously as we do, but I hope they would, just for the people's sake. Don't be on there and give somebody an average bourbon experience because you're representing the state,
Absolutely.
So.
Let's talk about the restaurant itself, right? Because we talked about your bourbon, we talked about your bar. Let's talk about the food a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's great food. I will say that hands down, my favorite dish here is the shrimp and grits, by far.
Mine's the pork chop.
Pork chop.
Yeah.
So kind of talk. Give the listeners a little bit if they want to come and visit you as they're coming to Louisville to kind of visit the Bourbon Trail, and they're like, okay, well, Bourbon's Bistro is now a stop on our. We
just got drunk on the trail. Where can we?
Yeah,
sober up.
We got to check.
Really,
we got to check this off. So kind of give the listeners a kind of an idea of what the menu looks like and maybe some of your favorite dishes or anything like that.
Well, we try to change the menu up about 4 times a year. To use them, we use a lot of local products, and like I said earlier, it's kind of upscale Southern. So you're going to have the shrimp and grits, steaks, crab cakes. Pork chop. We've got great seafood, and people around the country, when they come to Louisville, they're like, why would Louisville have great seafood? Surely you're not getting it out of the river.
Yeah.
But then you tell them about the UPS hub, the international hub, and it all makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, Louisville's a wonderful town for restaurants as well. But seafood on a lot of our menu. We used to get some overnighted from Honolulu. It got a little expensive there for a while, so we stopped doing that. But so the menu is kind of diverse. We change it up, like I said, about 4 times a year. We try to use we use definitely. There's several local farmers that we use for all of our vegetables and meat, our beef.
So what are some of your favorites that you've had?
Well,
it's kind of hard to choose your favorite.
Yeah,
style.
I mean, I don't miss many meals here, so it's hard to stay in shape. But the oysters are great. I love the oysters with the oysters. I love the fillet, the steak frites. Pork chop's really good.
Yeah, it's killer.
I'll do and because I know somebody back there, I get to I'll have what I usually get anymore is I've been doing a Caesar salad, and I'll either get a piece of salmon on top of it or a fillet or whatever.
So when you come here, you got to ask for the Jason special, and that's what
and then they'll frown at you probably. Because I know my staff probably frowns when they see my order come back because I always butcher it somewhere. Yeah, I mean that's why I started a restaurant, so I could cook what I wanted to cook or have what I wanted when I wanted it. So
yeah, we mentioned at the very beginning you can't forget the goat cheese appetizer.
Oh, yeah, the blue dog bread, it's killer.
No, yeah, that's definitely. So now we want to kind of talk about your personal whiskey collection because we know, at least we've talked before, there's even articles, if you can Google about it, that you've even got things out there talking about what it is to be dusty hunting and all these other kind of things. So first, let's kind of get an idea of what your whiskey collection looks like.
Well, anymore, it's a lot of beam decanters because there's a lot of them out there, But over the years, it's been, and I still have, I've got 4 or 5 bottles from Prohibition. Through the years, I bet we've probably drank, 25 or 30 bottles from Prohibition.
Oh, wow.
So, we've drank.
Was that a mistake or was that?
No, it was what it was. Yeah. I lucked into a bunch of it. Really, I bought it out of a guy's trunk.
Yeah.
And he asked me if I wanted buy these bottles for decorations. I said, yeah, sure. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I do.
Yeah, act like I'm going to put some hot glue and a hanger on it, right?
Yeah, I'll put them up as soon as I empty them out.
Yeah.
But so I've got a lot of, I don't collect empty decanters. I collect the whiskey that's in them. So I do have a lot of empty decanters as well. But we've, through here, I'd love to have some of the whiskey that's gone through here again. The one that sticks out and everybody talks about is I had an Old Crow chest set from it was barreled in 59, bottled in 69, and I've sat out by that fireplace and I've drank it with, everybody I could. Jimmy Russell, I've drank it with Freddie Noe, Julian Van Winkle. You name it, I've drank that whiskey with them because I bought the whole set. It's 32 bottles of a chest set from Old Crow. And to me, and Fred Minnick, I think, has written about it, says it's the best whiskey that's ever crossed his lips. And between both of us, I know we drink a lot of whiskey, and I think it's probably the best one that I've ever had. It's unexplainable, but it was just completely awesome.
So what is it? What do you think it was about all these whiskeys from national distillers? They're some of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely.
And why did it not last? And why? I wish we could bring that back. What was so special about them?
Well, it was just a sign of the times back then. Like I said, my great aunts and uncles were drinking them, and they were working at the distillery, and my parents, they were drinking more white liquors. They were into the gins and whatever. And I think you're going to see that very late 50s, early 60s when they start making these decanters, especially in the 60s. The kids didn't want to do what their parents were doing. Their parents were drinking brown liquor. So that's when you see in the 60s, really, when 60s and 70s, when the white liquors take over. And they've taken over up until, maybe the last 10 years. And how many flavors can you put on vodka? I don't know.
I've been in Heaven Hill. There's quite a bit.
Yeah, I was about to say apparently enough to fill an entire liquor store. Yeah, there's peach, there's cranberry, there's whipped cream, there's cotton
cinnamon.
candy. Oh, yeah, the flavors go on.
But I think now the culture's coming back around. I think for one the younger people are a little more educated about what they're doing, what they're eating, what they're drinking. If you look at no GMOs and a lot of people are gluten free and all this, they're just I think they're more educated about what they're eating and what they're drinking, and bourbon's a great place to start. I mean, vodka is basically a odorless, colorless, tasteless, neutral green spirit. Bourbon's not.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I think. I think the white liquors have had their time, and it's people like me and these other, millions of bourbon bars that are popping up that are seeing, they're actually doing their research and seeing what a good product it is, what a great product it is.
So I guess with that, you said you drink a lot of these porcelain bottles, and I've always been a little timid, right? So I mean, because people say that a lot of these bottles are made with lead. So is there kind of some truth to that? To say maybe you should or should not drink a lot of the bourbon that come from these bottles that were from the 70s, that come from Jim Beam and all these other places?
I've heard that.
He's still alive.
Yeah, I mean, so far so good, but you never know. Never really. I think that would be neat to test one somehow in a lab, have somebody test it to see the lead, how much lead is really in it. You hear about it, and
because at this point it's just basically formed the bones in your toes, right?
Yeah,
it's gone that far down,
right? But if you think about, once again, back in the day, with all the water pipes and everything was made out of lead.
Maybe I get that from my wife, because she's just crazy about lead poisoning, right?
It just seems there was a lot more lead in our diet back then for some reason. Or maybe it's just iron. I don't know. Iron pipes and iron. I don't know. I don't have any idea. I'd like to test one of the old ones. If there's anybody out there that can do that, let me know.
So another question about that. I've talked to a few other patrons or should I say bar owners and stuff like that, and a lot of them have a lot of good whiskey collections, and some of them are holding on to them because they're hoping that maybe they can turn the ways that Kentucky laws will go the way of D.C., where D.C. says that you can source a bottle from anywhere and sell it in your establishment. So some of these bottles that show up in D.C., they're pre-prohibition. They come up from anywhere. They're the A.H. Hirsch, gold foils that have been long and gone since, 20 whatever. And the idea is that they can sell those because they acquire them, they can sell them in their establishment. What's your kind of view on that? Is that something that you would like to see one day, to say like, well, maybe I should hold on to some of these because it would give my patrons the ability to be able to come in and drink from my bar, and they could have
it for yourself.
and they could have a 1985 old Granddad or whatever it is.
Well, my view is I don't think they should change the law by any means and have a dusty law. I think if you do, that takes a little bit of the mystique out of it. I'm not saying that by any means that I sell any of my dusty bottles, but I have had some with some patrons of mine.
There you go.
And,
And that's when you have to come in and ask for the Jason special.
That's right. Comes with a Caesar salad.
So if,
like a salmon.
I think if they pass the law will be, it'll be null and void in, say, 5 years.
Right.
Because
all the dusties
yeah,
will be gone.
all the dusties will be gone. And then where are you? It's just kind of a law that doesn't really apply in 5 years. I don't even see it applying in 5 years.
Right.
As much as the Dusties, people are, I've always been a big fan, and I hate that everybody's soaking up everything I could be getting. But
you got jackasses like me jumping on the,
anyhow, I just think I just kind of like the mystique of it, and hey, I've got a little something, and hey, it's just kind of it's almost like a speakeasy type thing.
Totally.
I think it's much better that way, and it should maybe ride off into the sunset as far as I'm concerned. Like
Right.
That, yeah.
No, totally.
I'm not looking to, it's more about the story of sitting around, say, drinking the Old Crow or sitting around drinking it than me charging you, something outrageous, $300 or $400 for it. I think there's more story in just having a sip of it than I got $300 out of that shot or.
No, I agree.
You can take the memory with you, but not the money.
Yeah,
that's what I know. He's been on a dusty hunt for a while, and for me, it's hard to always wrap my head around somebody paying outrageous money for something that, like, this bottle costs like $8.99 on the shelf like 10 years ago, and maybe 15,
one of my
20
old
years ago.
Granddads, there literally is $8.99 on it, and I think I paid like $200 for it.
Yeah,
and this was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
And there's so many people getting into it that it's really it's taking the market. Everything's overpriced. I mean, everything, all the Dusties are overpriced unless you find some reasonable guy. But everybody's just paying too much money for them.
Well, do you think?
And then they're holding on to them, and it's.
Right. Well, do you think your dusty hunting days are long and gone? Do you think the market's depleted?
So.
Okay.
I think there's some gems out there, somewhere. But there's definitely not as many as there used to be.
No.
Everybody's doing it, and I guess the people that are holding on to it, I don't know. I don't. They're not getting any better, especially in those porcelain ones, and all the ones that I've been through. A lot of the corks are already compromised, and they're already starting to evaporate a little bit. So.
Concentrated lead content, right?
Yeah, right. They're not getting any better, so I don't think there's any reason to hold on to them. I drink them.
No, totally.
Life's short.
So, last question for you, so we're ready to wrap it up. So for anybody that's out there that's listening that is going to think they want to open a bourbon bar or in the midst of it or anything like that, like what kind of advice can you give them to kind of steer them in the right direction and say, like, this is the lesson that I've learned, like the utmost important one?
Well, for me, I'm still learning lessons every day. But I would just say do your homework. Don't do it half-ass. If you're going to do it because, to me, it's personal.
Totally. All right.
It's you're representing Kentucky. You're representing the bourbon industry. So do your homework. Don't be a jackass.
Right. Don't just try to open up and be like, we're only going to serve like limited edition, whatever. And we're going to price it out of.
Don't get on it because of the bandwagon.
Right.
Go open a martini bar.
Right.
Exactly.
There you go. Open the martini bar.
Yeah. Skinny margaritas.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you again for being on the show today. This was a pleasure. We frequent here pretty often. Like I said, I
used to more, but now I have twins, so
that's
my dinners are few and far between. But
No, I mean, I was here probably 3 weeks ago, eating dinner on the patio out here, eating shrimp and grits and goat cheese, right? So yeah, it's one of the great places. And when you do come here, I mean, we're staring at the ambiance. You've got all kinds of great things on the wall, from pictures of old national distillers and all those great things. So you really get a true piece of history when you do come here. Even if you are visiting for the Bourbon Trail, you get an opportunity to not only keep drinking bourbon while you're doing it, but you get to sit there and look at some true history on the walls. So it's not just going to yet another restaurant, right?
Exactly. Yeah, Jason, thanks, man. Appreciate the time.
Thank you all
thanks
for
the
having me.
drinks.
Yeah,
It was
cheers.
delicious.
Thanks for having
yeah.
me.
There we go.
Yeah, it's nice it's cool in here. It's hot as hell outside.
Yeah.
But it's nice and cool in here. So this hit the spot. So
Good times.
Yeah, wrap us up, Kenny.
Yeah, so if you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. You can also follow us on all those good social media channels. And if you do like what you hear, support the show, patreon.com, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. We always take all of your comments and your suggestions to heart. We do our best to get everybody that we can on the show. And if you do, make sure you send us an email. It's theduo, THEDUO, @bourbonpursuit.com. And we will do our best to answer you as fast as possible.
That's
But
right.
if that's it, then we'll see you all next time. This podcast of Bourbon Pursuit is in partnership with thewhiskeywash.com, a lifestyle website for news and reviews for people who like whiskey, and for those who think a life without whiskey has no style. Thewhiskeywash.com.